Information, inspiration, motivation. You are now listening to the Going North podcast, where you're going to get all three of those things and more. I'm your host, author, speaker, and book enthusiast, Dom Brightman. And every week, we're going to be hearing from an author who's going to share their expertise to help you charge forward in life. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, we're bringing some fabulous humans from across the globe. Today is no different. Because thanks to one of our past guests, Mr. Jordan Gross, with his fabulous book From Journey to Cloud 9, we got another super special, awesome human on the podcast, baby. A legend in the game, my friends, a legend in the game, because this guy right here is the founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, where he works to empower entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals around the country to become more successful through networking. In addition, he's also a sought-after speaker and consultant to companies and organizations on topics related to professional networking and business relationship development. So let's give it up for one of the legends from Columbus, Ohio, the one and only Frank Agin. How are you today, sir?
I am doing well. How are you doing?
Doing fabulous indeed.
Thank you for having me on the program. This is great.
Yes, sir. It's an honor having you on, man. I was looking at your bibliography and all these books published, and then you got all these wonderful ebooks, and you got this business model that's actually a franchise model.
Yep, I'm busy. I stay busy.
There you go. Ain't nothing wrong with staying busy, especially it's the good busy. So if that's all introductions, they're not allowed to be 50 days long. So mind filling in some cavities or miss some fillings and tell us who is Mr. F.A. himself.
Yeah, as you indicated, I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and I spend my days working with small businesses, helping them become more successful. And how I stumbled upon this, I came to Columbus 30 some years ago to go to law school. And I have a law degree and an MBA from Ohio State. And when I left, I went to work for a really big firm. And I tell people that I didn't like that firm. I didn't like the work, I should say. The people were great, the pay was great, everything was great. I just didn't want to be a tax attorney for the rest of my life. So I left and I went into private practice. And I told people that a funny thing happened when I went into private practice. And the funny thing was that nothing happened. I had no idea how to get clients. And if you're a small business person, you can relate because that's 90% of the game. You know, we're all good at our craft. The plumber's great at turning a wrench. The electrician's great at being an electrician. The accountant's great at being an accountant. The attorney great at being an attorney. But the separator is the ability to get those clients. And so I had no idea how to do it. And so, I mean, Dom, I was that bad actor at the chamber events, and I just, I didn't know what I was doing. And then one day I had lunch with a friend of mine. This was probably about 4 weeks into this lonely experience. And I just told her, I said, I don't want to go begging for my job back. That was still a possibility. I want to be done with this, done working for the man. I want to be on my own. And she said, well, what I would recommend is you need to get into a tips club or a leads group. Through a couple introductions, she introduced me to people who were meeting on a weekly basis to learn about each other and exchange referrals. And immediately it made total sense. I can lift myself up by helping these people sitting around the room with me. I help them and they're going to help me in return, which makes total sense because it's very easy for me to promote someone else and really difficult to promote myself. So I'm going to focus my energies on promoting other people and trusting that they're going to do the same. And it worked really well. So I really kind of doubled down on that effort, became very involved. One day had the opportunity to become the first franchisee in that organization. And then sometime down the line had the opportunity to buy it out. And that was 15 plus years ago. Bought it out and rebranded it as AmSpirit Business Connections. And what we do is we bring together entrepreneurs, sales reps, and professionals to meet on a weekly basis, to learn about each other, develop these relationships, really understand what one another does, and through that process, refer each other business. So as a part of that, when I first started doing it, it was just kind of, hey, this is an investment. And then as time went on, people really started to look to me for answers. Well, how can I be more successful at asking for referrals? And there are, I don't want to call them tricks, but there are things you can do to become more successful asking for referrals. There are things you can do to become more successful at giving referrals. And I was seeing these things, and I became a student of networking. People wanted to know how they could better work a room, how they could engage in small talk. So I did a lot of reading and learned about things, and over time had my own experiences and my own observations, and that led me to writing a series of books on professional networking, and that's all rolled into then creating a couple of podcasts that focus on professional relationships, business networking, how to make them work, why they work from a behavioral science standpoint. The more we know about these things, the better we're able to make them work for us. So that's the nickel tour.
Sweet. It's better than a 3-hour tour because we would end up on an island talking about, I don't know, like underwater basket weaving, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, indeed. So I guess in a way you could kind of consider yourself a networking doctor in a way, since you got the networking RX series and all this other stuff that you learned over the years and all the information you gained from others. You can actually help others become more efficient at networking and everything that entails with it, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. On a daily basis, I'm working with people trying to help them. And Dom, I tell them there are only 3 reasons why you don't get referrals. It's only 3 reasons. So if somebody tells me they're not getting referrals, I say, okay, let's just dissect this, because it's going to be only one of 3 things. 1, you don't have a relationship with people. People don't know you, they don't like you, they don't trust you. And a lot of that can be fixed in time and by doing the right things. But it's possible to be known, liked, and trusted and not have someone give you referrals. If they're not able to recognize opportunities for you, they're not going to send you referrals. No matter how much they like you, they need to be able to recognize opportunities for you. And so we need to, we as business people need to educate people on, these are the things to look for me. And you can't be using the words anybody or anyone. It's got to be somewhat specific. But kind of painting a picture in other people's minds as to what they should be looking for or listening for. If somebody says this, think of me. If you see this, think of me. And so I will spend time working with members in our organizations and really anybody who needs the help, just kind of talking with them about, okay, tell me what you do, and let's really kind of craft how you need to be talking about yourself. As an attorney, I started out, I wasn't good at it. I would just say, well, I'm an attorney. Anybody who needs an attorney would be a great referral for me. And that doesn't really help people. But when I started saying, listen, if you know somebody who's looking to enter into a commercial lease, that's a great opportunity for me. I can help them review that lease so they know what they're signing. So that's the second piece of it, is getting people to be able to, getting others to be able to recognize opportunities for us. But then the third thing is that they can know, like, and trust us and be able to recognize opportunities, but they also need to be able to have a conversation with somebody else about what we do. So picking on my my little law dilemma, people know, like, and trust me, and I educated them. Listen, if you know somebody who's contemplating entering into a commercial lease, recognize that could be a great opportunity for me. But recognition alone doesn't connect them to me. To connect them to me, ask a couple questions. 1, how big is that commercial lease that you're looking at? Are there terms in there you don't understand? Chances are the person is going to say yes. Now, at this moment, they're not talking about me per se. They're just talking about the situation from a legal standpoint. And likely the person who's contemplating signing the lease is going to say, yeah, oh my God, it's, the document's 2 inches thick, and that's an exaggeration, but there are a lot of things here I don't understand. I don't understand what these things mean. And at that point, the person looking to refer you can say, yeah, I've seen those. They're they're horribly big and horribly complicated, but I know a guy who specializes in reviewing those sorts of things. Could I have him give you a call? So that's, that kind of gives you an example of how we kind of work with people and get them thinking about presenting themselves in a better fashion.
Amen to that. Amen to that indeed. And you're right about the whole recognition thing. It's like, yeah, they can know you as that person, but they may need more details and they may not have had a good enough conversation to get enough details on how they can help fit you into someone else's puzzle in a way.
Yeah, it's the key. It's the key.
That's right. That's right indeed. That's how you open them doors right there. Just use that magical key right there, that networking key. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So beautiful. So for someone who is new to networking and especially in this era where the whole introvert thing is kind of like this huge thing nowadays,
Yep.
what advice would you give to the introvert networker?
You know, I get this question a lot, and I think a lot of people kind of look at themselves as being introverted, and really it doesn't matter. I had a guy in my podcast. He's a psychologist out of Indianapolis, Tim Scher, and he's got a great podcast called the How to Be Mesmerizing podcast. And we talked about this, and it was very enlightening the perspective of a psychologist. And he said there are really four types of people at networking events, or four people out there networking in general. It doesn't have to be a networking event. I mean, if you stop and think about it, Dom, you go to a tailgate, it's a networking event. You're talking to somebody at the checkout line, that's a networking event. It's a networking
Yep.
opportunity. And so let's just talk in general sense and networking opportunities to have conversations. And so he says, there are really four types of people. There is the wallflower, the person who, we'll call them the introvert, the person who just doesn't want any part of it. And there's also the person who he termed the class clown, the person who, kind of yucking it up. Then there's the person who is overly aggressive, pushing whatever they have to sell. And then there's the person who is, not the wallflower, not the class clown, but out there having reasonable small talk with people. And he said the common thread between all those people is insecurities, in that everybody has insecurities. And the person who's the wallflower has insecurities, and that's the reason they're the wallflower. I don't fit in, I don't belong, I don't really know how to talk, I don't feel comfortable, so they're going to be the wallflower. The class clown has insecurities, and how they deal with their insecurities is to simply yuck it up. Hey, if I'm laughing, if I'm making people laugh, then I don't really feel so insecure about myself. And the person who's overly aggressive, they're insecure and they just feel like they need to make the sale, they need to make the sale now, or they're just going to lose the opportunity. And the person who's well adjusted has insecurities as well, but is well adjusted, and learns how to deal with them. And so, the introvert, they just need to really kind of come to grips with just being well adjusted. And so my advice it's kind of a long lead into your question, but my advice to the introvert is, one, don't worry about what you have to say. Focus in on what you're going to get the other person saying. And that's really the trick to small talk. Come in armed with a series of questions that you can get the other person talking. You're meeting somebody, where are you from, making a comment about something and getting them talking. If I go to somebody and say, okay, where are you, wow, you kind of got an accent, where are you from? Then they're going to tell me, oh, I moved here from California. Oh, really? What made you move to the Midwest from California? Well, there's a story there, right? And you let them tell that story. And as they tell that story, you listen and you have things that you can add to that. And then there are things that, other questions that you can follow up with, but you keep going back to them and getting them to talk and, just listening and validating what they have to say, understanding and validating them. And that helps build that relationship, and you don't really have to say a whole lot. So that's my first response to introverts. My second response to introverts is what I recommend. I run into this all the time. What I recommend people do is find something you're passionate about. It may be your church, it may be something in the community, maybe something in the school, and volunteer. Find an opportunity to volunteer, because when you volunteer, you put yourself out there with other people who care about the same things you care about. When you put yourself out there, you show that you care. And people are attracted to those people who are contributing to the world around them. So you've kind of demonstrate that you're that type of person. And from that, they start to develop a relationship with you. And that's all networking is. It's just developing relationships with people, whether it's personal or professional. It's just developing relationships with others.
Amen to that right there. Amen to that. And it's so powerful because I think it's one of your past interviews where you mentioned how sometimes it may not always be about the person that you meet at the networking event. It could be the person that they know.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really your golden ticket.
Well, it is. And I interviewed a gentleman by the name of David Burkus, who has written a book called A Friend of a Friend. Fascinating book. And really what he talks about in the book, and you can find him on YouTube as well, David Burkus, just like it sounds. But he talks about really the power in our world is not necessarily the people we know, but the people we know. That's where that's where the power is. And sometimes somebody will walk into a room and say, well, there's nobody here. They may be a realtor. There's nobody here who's going to buy a house from me. And they'll just make a judgment on the room or people based on that. But really the power is the people beyond that. And I, you know, I see that all the time. I tell people, listen, if you're, a room of 25 people, if you sold everybody in this room a house, you'd have a good year. But if you sold a house to everybody the people in this room know, you'd have a great career. And there's a huge difference. And so you need to kind of change your mindset and stop looking at people as one-on-one transactions, but looking through them to all the people that they could connect you to. And so then you just start serving that person, helping that person as well, and then they'll connect you on from there.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Got to go beyond the surface. Can't just scratch the surface and be like, yeah, I'm good.
Yep.
Got to really go deep in there. You got to go deep dish pie style.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Like a whole entire deep dish pie. Yes, indeed. A networking pie in this case.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Another interesting fact I picked up about you that you actually became an extra in the Shawshank Redemption movie. How the heck did that happen?
Oh, geez, that networking. Everything's networking. When I was working downtown, I had mentioned I didn't really enjoy the existence. And I guess that's neither here nor there. But, this was early on in my career. And I tell people the only thing I owned at that point in time, I had clothes and a bed and things like that, but I had a car. That was my prized possession. I rented an apartment. So I really didn't have anything beyond the personal things other than my car. And I was very particular about where I parked my car. And I found a parking garage that was near my office, which was a plus because it was in the central part of Columbus, Ohio. And it was relatively inexpensive. But there's always a catch, and there was a catch to it being inexpensive, and that was that you had to leave your keys with the parking lot attendant because they were going to move around. They were going to move around the cars depending upon what worked best for them, and that was just the deal. So I was a little unnerved by having somebody else drive my car, but that was just what I was signing up for, and so I just decided that I was going to develop a relationship. And I didn't really think in those terms, but I'm going to get to know these people. I'm not going to just be any car that they have. It's going to be Frank's car I'm driving. So I would have conversations every day with my parking lot attendants, not long conversations. How are you doing? What's going on? Joke around. Well, there was one particular parking lot attendant. Her name was Twyla. And Twyla was kind of a central figure because she operated the keyboard. You would hand your key off to her and say, well, I'm in 19A or whatever. And she'd put the keys on the board for 19A. and I would just say hello to Twyla every day. How you doing? And just a tip for our listening men out there. One thing women like to talk about is they love to talk about their kids. The other thing that women really love to talk about is they love to talk about their grandkids. And Twyla had both. She had a daughter and a granddaughter. And hey, how's your daughter doing? How's this going? Oh, that picture of your granddaughter. That's really nice. And I was genuine about it. I wasn't manipulative, but just have a nice little conversation as I drop off the keys. And so she, got to know bits and pieces of me, and she knew I was an attorney type, like many of the people who park there. I was an attorney type. But one day she stopped me and she said, "Hey, how would you like to be an extra in a movie? They're shooting a movie up north of where we were, Columbus, Ohio, Upper Sandusky, and they need attorney types to be extras." And I was like, "Hey, I'm all over it. I'll do this." And so I put a little portfolio together that weekend. The casting was that weekend, and drove up to the casting up near where they were going to be doing the shooting. And I'm standing in this big long line, and realized that somebody said, "Yeah, the name of the movie, it's a Stephen King movie." I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not a Stephen King fan, but I don't care. I'm just being an extra in a movie. And then they let it be known that the name of the movie was Rita Hayworth or something like that. And turns out that Stephen King had written a short story called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. And that was the movie. I was standing in line to be in the Shawshank Redemption. Now, for those who have seen the movie, and I rarely run into somebody who hasn't seen the movie, I was totally blown away when I saw it. But the opening scene is in a courtroom, and Andy Dupree is being sentenced for the killing of his lover and his wife and his wife and her lover. He's going to be getting sentenced for the killing of them. Well, I'm not in that scene. That's the funny part. I got cast as a prisoner. But the tale to the story, Dom, is that there were hundreds of attorney types that came and went from this parking garage every day. And I was the only one who got the opportunity because I was the only one who took the time to talk to her. And the point I always make with respect to that story is every contact has opportunity. You just never know. Not every contact is going to be your next best client or whatever, employer, whatever it might be, but everybody knows somebody who can be. And so I always challenge people as to, this woman's name was Twyla. I always challenge people as, who's the Twyla in your life? Who's the possible person that you might be overlooking, or the person that you can just invest a little bit of time in to just show them some respect? She was never on my holiday card list. She probably doesn't even know, she doesn't know I'm telling this story. She doesn't know anything about that, but she gave me a wonderful opportunity to hang on the set of the Shawshank Redemption for a day and hang out with the likes of Morgan Freeman, who is just an incredibly genuine person, right? When somebody of his fame comes up to you and says, "Hi, I'm Morgan," you just know they're a genuine person, right? There were no pretenses there. I knew who he was. Everybody knew who he was. But so anyhow, that's the tale of how I got on the Shawshank Redemption.
Heck yeah, man. And it's very powerful indeed. It's the power of always acknowledging people and heck, even being available for that opportunity when it shows up.
Yep.
So with this podcasting tour that you've been on, is there a question that you wish more podcast hosts or even radio hosts would ask you?
No, not necessarily. We could kind of get into things. I mean, the one that I hear a lot is what advice would you give to a younger version of yourself? That's kind of a standard one that gets floated around, and I think that's a powerful question, and it's not always easily answered, right? Because it's easy to say, well, I wouldn't have made this mistake back when, right? I wouldn't have made this mistake. That's the advice. Don't make this mistake. But what people forget is that sometimes those mistakes, sometimes those missteps, sometimes those choices of going left rather than right are really the things that are put you in the place that you're in today. If I didn't go to the Ohio State University, I probably wouldn't be in the place I am today. If I didn't work at the firm that I was at, I wouldn't be in the place I am today. And so it all kind of daisy chains together. But if I do have, I'll call it a regret I wish I would have known more about this networking thing, about this relationship thing sooner, because I really poured into my books, poured into my studies. And I'm not saying that's not important. It is important. But what's really important are the relationships that go with it. Those are the things that are of most importance. There's a lot of really brilliant people out there who aren't hitting their potential because they have, they're just focused on what they know and not really the people that they work with. They're not really focused on the relationships, and that's sad. And then there are a lot of people out there that are really successful that aren't necessarily overly brilliant, but they have focused on the relationships and done a lot with the relationships, and people go to great lengths to support them. So it's just I wish I'd have done a better job of that early on, and it's certainly something that I've really trying to instill in my kids, that relationships are really important.
Yep, that's true, and that's the advantage the kids have. It's like, yep, it's like
Yeah.
daddy made some mistakes. Here's some stuff that you don't want to do. Now,
Right.
granted,
Yep. Yep.
it's no guarantee they'll always listen, but hey, they still have that advantage if they take advantage.
Right.
Well, beautiful thing is that, of course, the younger version of yourself. So here comes the cliche question, I guess. If you were to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but this time in 2020, with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Well, I would certainly, I would, again, it's back to relationships. I would double down on trying to have more connections, more meaningful connections with people. Diverse connections. I would get involved in the community. I would have gotten involved in the community, things that I was passionate about, but really kind of put myself out there. I would have been less worried about the amount of money I'm making, the amount of money I'm being paid, and being more focused on being happy and serving other people. Because in time the money comes, right? In time the money comes, you build value, and you're compensated for that value. But when you're young, you're short-sighted. You think you need to do it all now, and you don't. So
Sweet. Rock solid advice right there. Rock solid advice. That's what I'm talking about. So, for those who want to keep talking with you and get to know more about the fabulous Frank, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
well, I always tell people the best way to find me is I have a website, frankagin.com, frankagin.com. From there, you can connect to my organization. You can have my email. You can connect to my LinkedIn, my Facebook, my Twitter. So there's lots of ways that you can connect with me. That's kind of a central hub. Email is always the best to kind of reach out. I respond to my emails, and phone calls are tough. If somebody just, you and I are talking on the phone right now, I earmarked this time for you. So if somebody called me 5 minutes before we got on, or called me while we were talking, they're just not going to get me. But if somebody wants to set up a time, I'll set up a time, and then it's their time, you know? So, but generally over email is the best way to do that.
Well, there you have it, folks. Reach out to the fabulous Frank right there. Check out his site and check out both of his podcasts too. He's bringing on some fabulous guests with some great knowledge about relationship building as well. And not to mention his other podcast where he's sharing some short relationship secrets to help you become even more successful at them. So check him out like a library book, my friends. Check him out. So, any parting words to the folks still listening, Frank?
Get out there and care for somebody, develop a relationship, focus your attentions on other people and helping them, and it'll all work out.
How's it going, you showstopper? It's great that you enjoyed this episode of the Going North podcast. Be sure to shoot the guest an email or head over to the social media pages and leave them a nice response that you heard them on the Going North podcast, so that way they can continue to be inspired to do great things. And be sure to share this podcast with others that you think would enjoy it as well.